Welcome. Tonight, we invite you into a peaceful corner of the universe. Gotham City lay shrouded in darkness. Thick clouds hung low in the sky, obscuring the moon and the stars, casting a permanent gloom over the city's towering skyline. Rain fell in heavy sheets, drumming relentlessly against the streets and rooftops. The weather had worsened as the day had turned to night, but the citizens of Gotham, already accustomed to misery, went about their lives, oblivious to the deeper shadow that was growing in their midst. Amid the maze of alleyways, the heart of the city pulsed with the usual hum of crime. Robberies, muggings, and violence had become so routine that many had stopped noticing. But tonight was different. There was an unusual air, a silent tension that pervaded the city, crawling from the slums of the Narrows to the wealthier districts where the powerful of Gotham resided. In the shadows, where eyes could not reach, evil was gathering, bolder than ever before. The streets, already dangerous, would soon face a far more sinister storm. In an old, abandoned theater on Gotham's east side, a meeting of unparalleled danger was taking place. The most feared and infamous of Gotham's villains, Joker, Bane, the Riddler, Poison Ivy, Two-Face, and others, had assembled for the first time in years. It was a gathering that no one had thought possible, for their egos and personal vendettas often kept them from working together. But tonight, they had come together for one purpose: to bring Gotham to its knees. Joker stood at the head of the room, his maniacal grin cutting through the shadows. He had called them together, each one swayed by promises of revenge and power, but what he truly craved was chaos. His pale face, smeared with his signature war paint, betrayed the excitement barely contained within him. "Ladies and gentlemen," he cackled, his voice slicing through the murmurs of the gathered rogues. "Tonight we take Gotham. We will rewrite the rules, burn down its palaces, and turn it into our playground." Ha ha ha! Joker's madness reverberated through the room, sending chills through even the most hardened of villains. Bane, standing silent and brooding in the corner, his face obscured by his mask, cracked his knuckles ominously. He had his own reasons for joining this alliance. Poison Ivy, lounging seductively, twirled a vine between her fingers, the green of her eyes glowing eerily in the dim light. The Riddler, impatient and fidgety, adjusted his bowler hat as his mind raced with the intricacies of the plan. Two-Face, sitting at the far end of the room, flipped his coin repeatedly, waiting for it to decide his course of action. And there were others, less known but just as dangerous, eager to carve their names into the bones of the city. As the villains conspired, Gotham's night deepened. The rain thickened, painting the streets in a slick, reflective sheen, making the city's towering buildings appear as monstrous, faceless giants. Elsewhere, in a much darker part of Gotham, a lone figure moved silently atop the rooftops. He was more myth than man, a figure of fear and legend to the criminals below. The Bat had been watching, waiting. Though many of Gotham's elite had yet to understand the magnitude of the storm brewing beneath their feet, Batman had seen it coming. His network of informants had whispered to him of an alliance, but the magnitude of the gathering now taking place had surpassed even his expectations. Never before had such a concentrated force of evil united. The weight of Gotham's fate pressed on his shoulders like never before. In the rain-soaked city, he moved silently. The cape swirled behind him as he leapt from one building to the next, eyes scanning the horizon. He could feel the city's pulse, its heart racing with the danger it didn't yet understand. He needed to prepare. But even Batman, in all his meticulous planning, was not fully prepared for what was about to come. As he reached the Batcave beneath Wayne Manor, Bruce Wayne descended from the darkness above into the heart of his sanctuary. The cave felt colder than usual, and Alfred, his loyal butler and confidant, stood waiting at the computer console. His face was grim, his usual composed demeanor showing the slightest cracks of concern. "Master Wayne," Alfred began, "it appears your worst fears are coming to fruition. I have been monitoring the city's movements, and there have been several reports of unusual activity. I dare say it's more than just your average crime wave." Bruce removed his cowl, his face shadowed by exhaustion but his eyes alight with determination. He knew Alfred was right. The pieces were falling into place, faster than even he could track. The villains were gathering, forming a threat more unified than he had ever faced. And with Gotham's police force stretched thin, Commissioner Gordon would be ill-prepared to handle the chaos that was sure to erupt. "Get the suit ready, Alfred." "The new one," Bruce said, his voice as hard as the reinforced steel of his Batmobile. "We're going to need it." "Very good, sir. And may I suggest a new approach? This is different. This is bigger than anything we've faced before." Bruce paused, his mind already racing through strategies and contingencies. Alfred was right, as always. This was bigger. It required something more. He would need to become something more than just Batman. Something darker. Something Gotham had never seen before. As Alfred prepared the equipment, Bruce stared at the flickering images on the Batcave screen. Images of Gotham, of the villains now conspiring to take it, and of the citizens unknowingly trapped in the middle of it all. He clenched his fists. Gotham had always been his to protect, but this time it would demand everything from him. He walked over to the new suit, an upgrade from his usual attire. Darker, reinforced, and armed with more advanced technology, it shimmered under the pale cave lights. A crimson hue ran across the emblem, barely noticeable but symbolically powerful. Bruce knew that to stop the evil brewing in the city, he would need to unleash a new force upon Gotham's underworld. A force that even they feared, the Crimson Knight. As dawn approached, Gotham would see the darkest night in its history. The city, once a decaying bastion of corruption, was now about to become the ultimate battleground. And when the darkness came, only the Crimson Knight would be ready to meet it. As the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, Gotham remained cloaked in a foreboding stillness. The rain had subsided, leaving the streets wet and slick, their surface reflecting the muted glow of the few streetlights that still worked. Despite the seeming calm, an invisible threat loomed over every alley, every rooftop, and every darkened corner. The villains who had once skulked in the shadows were now emboldened by their newfound unity, and the city, in all its sprawling chaos, was unaware of the terror about to be unleashed. Bruce Wayne stood silently before the towering glass display case in the Batcave. Before him hung the new suit, a sleek, armored iteration of his classic Batman attire, but with one stark difference. Its emblem, the iconic bat symbol, now bore a crimson streak. It was a subtle change, yet it represented a significant transformation in his approach to Gotham's enemies. The suit itself was more advanced, reinforced to withstand the brutal onslaught that was coming. It would offer him the edge he needed, not just in combat, but in psychological warfare. The villains had always feared Batman, but now they would fear something more. As Bruce stared at the crimson emblem, his thoughts drifted back to the past. He had always been Gotham's protector, the silent guardian who watched over the city from the shadows. But Gotham was changing. The villains were evolving, their plans becoming more sophisticated, their alliances more dangerous. If he was to stand a chance against them, he would need to evolve as well. Batman had always been a symbol of justice and fear, but now he needed to become something darker, something Gotham had never seen before. The Crimson Knight would be born from the same darkness that gave birth to his enemies. Alfred approached from behind, his steps soft yet deliberate. In his hands, He carried the final components of the suit, a pair of gauntlets, reinforced with shock-absorbing technology and enhanced defensive capabilities. Without a word, he handed them to Bruce, who inspected them silently before slipping them onto his arms. "You're ready, Master Wayne," Alfred said softly, though the concern in his voice was palpable. "But this will take you to a place you may not wish to return from." Bruce met Alfred's gaze, his expression steely but burdened by the weight of the decision he had made. "I won't lose Gotham, Alfred. Not like this." Alfred nodded. "Very well, sir. But I fear Gotham may not be the only one at risk." With those words lingering in the air, Bruce activated the suit, the crimson emblem glowing faintly as the advanced systems came online. He felt the familiar weight of the cowl as he pulled it over his face, but the suit felt different, heavier, more powerful. This wasn't just the suit of Batman. It was the suit of the Crimson Knight, a weapon forged in the fire of Gotham's darkest days. Outside, the city was beginning to stir. The sun's weak rays struggled to pierce the heavy clouds that still lingered in the sky, and as the morning commuters began to fill the streets, Gotham's criminal underworld was already in motion. Word had spread of the villains' gathering, and the city's most feared crime lords were preparing for what many believed would be the end of Gotham as it was known. In a dingy bar in the Narrows, whispers of an imminent assault on the city spread like wildfire. Thugs, gang members, and small-time crooks were all being recruited for the chaos that was about to erupt. But as they plotted and schemed, a dark figure watched them from above. Perched on a rusted fire escape, the Crimson Knight observed the scene below, his eyes scanning the gathering of criminals. His cape, a black shroud with crimson accents, fluttered in the wind as he prepared to strike. Without warning, he descended upon them like a shadow made flesh. The thugs had no time to react before the first one was taken down with a swift, silent strike to the neck. The others turned, panic spreading through their ranks as they saw the dark figure moving through them with brutal efficiency. Each movement was calculated, precise. The Crimson Knight was not just fighting, he was hunting. And the criminals, for all their bravado, were the prey. One of the gang members, a tall brute wielding a crowbar, swung wildly at the dark figure, but the Crimson Knight ducked, his movements fluid and controlled. With a swift counter, he grabbed the man's arm, twisting it until the sound of bone snapping echoed through the alley. The thug screamed in pain before being silenced by a sharp blow to the head. As the last of the criminals fell to the ground, unconscious or incapacitated, the Crimson Knight stood over them, his chest heaving slightly from the exertion. The fight had been swift, but it was only the beginning. These were small-time criminals, mere pawns in the grander scheme. The true threat lay with the gathering of Gotham's most powerful villains, and they were already in motion. From the shadows, a figure approached cautiously. It was Catwoman, her silhouette unmistakable as she moved with the grace of a predator. She had been watching him, as she always did, curious about this new force that had emerged in Gotham's underworld. But tonight she saw something different. This wasn't the Batman she knew. His movements, his brutality, everything about him had changed. So, she purred as she stepped into the dim light. "You've traded in the Bat for something a little more deadly." The Crimson Knight turned to face her, his expression hidden beneath the cowl. "This city is about to fall. The villains have united." Catwoman raised an eyebrow, her lips curling into a sly smile. "And here I thought you could handle anything Gotham threw at you. This is different. They're planning something bigger than anything we've seen before." She stepped closer, her eyes narrowing as she studied him. "And what makes you think you can stop them? What makes you think you can stop all of them?" The Crimson Knight's gaze was unwavering. "Because I have to." Catwoman regarded him for a moment, her smile fading as she realized the gravity of the situation. She had always danced on the edge of Gotham's criminal world, never fully committing to either side. But if what he was saying was true, even she would not be immune to the coming storm. "Then I suggest you hurry," she said softly, "before it's too late." With that, she vanished back into the shadows, leaving the Crimson Knight alone in the alley. He knew she was right. Time was running out, and the longer he waited, the more ground the villains would gain. He needed to move quickly, to strike at the heart of their conspiracy before they could unleash their plan on the city. But even as he prepared to leave, a cold, familiar voice echoed from the darkness. "Leaving so soon, Batman? Or should I say, the Crimson Knight?" The voice was unmistakable. The Riddler stepped into view, his green suit gleaming under the dim light of the alley. His smirk was maddening, and his eyes sparkled with the thrill of the game. "Let's see if you're as clever as they say," the Riddler taunted, tossing a small device at the Crimson Knight's feet. It was a bomb, wired to detonate within seconds, and as the Crimson Knight reacted, the Riddler disappeared into the night, leaving only his cryptic laughter in the wind. With a swift motion, the Crimson Knight disarmed the device, but the message was clear. The game had begun, and Gotham's greatest villains were already making their move. The Crimson Knight knew he had no choice. He had to stop them no matter the cost. And as he looked out over the city from the rooftops, he vowed that Gotham would not fall, not while he still stood to defend it. The streets of Gotham were alive with tension. Word of the Crimson Knight's return had spread quickly through the city's criminal underworld, and as the villains consolidated their power, their foot soldiers grew more aggressive, more daring. Small-time crooks and low-level enforcers roamed the streets, emboldened by the promises of chaos. Gotham's citizens could feel the change in the air, a rising storm on the horizon, though few truly understood its scale. In the heart of Gotham, a labyrinth of alleyways and abandoned buildings led to one of the city's oldest institutions, Arkham Asylum. It stood like a monolith of madness, casting a long shadow over the surrounding neighborhoods. And tonight, within its fortified walls, the true masterminds of Gotham's villainy had gathered. In a hidden wing, deep within Arkham's dark corridors, a secret meeting was taking place. The most dangerous minds in Gotham, those who had spent years plotting the city's downfall, were convening under one banner. The room was dimly lit, with flickering lights casting long shadows on the cracked walls. Seated at a round table were Gotham's most infamous rogues. The Riddler, his suit pristine, sat with an amused smirk, tapping his cane idly against the floor. Next to him, Poison Ivy leaned back in her chair, her eyes glowing faintly with an otherworldly green hue, vines lazily coiling around her feet as if ready to strike. At the head of the table sat Two-Face, his disfigured half illuminated by the sparse lighting, flipping his coin repeatedly, its metallic clink echoing through the room. From the shadows, another figure emerged, his presence unmistakable. The Penguin, short but imposing, his cane tapping the ground with each deliberate step. He approached the table with a confident air, his monocle glinting in the low light. "The time has come," Penguin rasped, his voice filled with dark anticipation. "No more games, no more distractions. We've waited long enough." Two-Face's voice cut through the room. "We've got one chance at this. One coin flip and Gotham is ours." The Riddler chuckled, leaning forward. "Indeed, but there's always a wild card in play. Our dear friend, the Crimson Knight, is proving to be quite the inconvenience. Let him come," Poison Ivy hissed, her vines tightening around the table. "He won't stop what's coming. Nature has a way of reclaiming what belongs to it." Penguin raised a hand, silencing them. "Let him play his part. The stage is set, And when we're finished, Gotham will be ours. As they continued to plot their coordinated strike on the city, none noticed the figure lurking in the rafters above them. Hidden among the shadows, the Crimson Knight listened intently to every word. He had infiltrated Arkham hours earlier, moving silently through the asylum's corridors, avoiding detection. His new suit, equipped with advanced cloaking technology, allowed him to blend seamlessly into the darkness. From his vantage point, he could see everything, every player in this twisted game, every villain whose schemes threatened to plunge Gotham into chaos. The Crimson Knight knew that time was running out. The villain's plan was already in motion, and he would have to act swiftly to prevent it from spiraling out of control. But he couldn't strike now, not yet. He needed more information, needed to understand the full scope of their plot before he made his move. As the meeting continued below, the door to the chamber swung open, and a new figure stepped into the room. Bane, towering over the others, his muscles rippling beneath his tactical gear, entered with a calm, deadly confidence. The air seemed to grow heavier with his presence. His deep voice rumbled through the room as he spoke. "It's time," Bane said simply, his eyes scanning the room. "The pieces are in place. The League of Shadows stands ready." The mention of the League sent a ripple of tension through the room. The League of Shadows, an ancient order that sought to bring Gotham to its knees, was now allied with Gotham's most dangerous villains. Bane had made sure of that, and with their resources and deadly skill at his command, their plan seemed unstoppable. Two-Face flipped his coin, catching it in midair. "So, what's next?" Bane stepped forward, his gaze cold and calculating. "We break the city. We bring it to its knees. Gotham's heroes have protected it for too long, but they will fall like the rest. And when they do, we will rise from the ashes." The villains all nodded in agreement, each of them consumed by their own twisted visions of Gotham's destruction. But the Crimson Knight, still hidden above, knew he had to stop them. The stakes had never been higher. Bane's involvement meant this was more than a simple power grab. It was the beginning of an all-out assault on Gotham, one that could leave the city in ruins. Quietly, the Crimson Knight retreated from the rafters, moving silently through the dark corridors of Arkham. His mind raced as he pieced together the puzzle. The villains were planning something massive, something that would shake Gotham to its core. But there was still one piece missing. What was the trigger? What would set their plan into motion? As he reached the outer courtyard of Arkham, the answer came in the form of a sudden explosion. The ground shook beneath him as flames erupted from a nearby building, sending debris flying into the night sky. The Crimson Knight's instincts kicked in, and he rushed toward the source of the blast, his cape billowing behind him as he sprinted through the chaos. When he arrived, the scene before him was one of utter destruction. The explosion had ripped through one of Arkham's wings, freeing dozens of inmates in the process. Among the chaos, he spotted several of Gotham's notorious criminals, Killer Croc, the Mad Hatter, and Victor Zash, making their escape. The explosion had been a diversion, a means to free Arkham's most dangerous residents and unleash them upon the city. With no time to waste, the Crimson Knight leaped into action. His first target was Killer Croc, whose massive form was tearing through the wreckage, heading straight for the city's outskirts. With a burst of speed, the Crimson Knight launched himself at Croc, striking him with a powerful blow to the back of the head. The impact staggered Croc, but the beast quickly recovered, turning to face his attacker with a savage snarl. "You can't stop me, Bat," Croc roared, swiping at the Crimson Knight with his massive claws. But the Crimson Knight was faster, ducking beneath Croc's attack and landing a series of precise strikes to his ribs and knees. Croc's movements became sluggish as the blows took their toll, but he was far from defeated. With a roar, he charged at the Crimson Knight, his massive jaws snapping dangerously close. The Crimson Knight evaded the attack, using the momentum to throw Croc off balance. With one final, powerful strike, he brought Croc to the ground, incapacitating him with a blow to the base of the skull. As Croc lay unconscious, the Crimson Knight quickly secured him, using a reinforced grappling cable to bind the massive villain. But there was no time to rest. The other inmates were still on the loose, and the Crimson Knight knew he had to act quickly to prevent them from spreading chaos across Gotham. He could hear the distant wail of police sirens as the GCPD rushed to the scene, but they would be overwhelmed if the escaped criminals reached the city. Moving with the precision and speed of a predator, the Crimson Knight tracked down each of the fleeing inmates. The Mad Hatter, already attempting to hypnotize a group of Arkham staff, was swiftly taken down with a well-placed batarang to his control device. Victor Zash, knife in hand and already carving tally marks into his skin, was disarmed and subdued in a brutal close-quarters fight, his madness no match for the Crimson Knight's resolve. As the last of the escaped inmates was secured, the Crimson Knight stood amidst the wreckage of Arkham, his breath steady despite the intensity of the battle. The explosion had been a part of the villain's grander plan, a distraction meant to weaken Gotham's defenses. And though he had contained the immediate threat, he knew that the real fight was only just beginning. The villains were united, their resources vast, and their plan intricately woven into the very fabric of Gotham's underworld. The Crimson Knight would have to dig deeper, go further than ever before, to uncover the full scope of their conspiracy. But no matter how dark the path ahead, he would not falter. Gotham's future hung in the balance, and he would do whatever it took to protect it from those who sought to destroy it. As dawn broke over Gotham, the sky above the city was a pale gray, thick clouds threatening rain. The Crimson Knight stood atop a weathered gargoyle on the edge of a skyscraper, his sharp gaze surveying the streets below. The battle at Arkham had only been the beginning. The villains were plotting something much larger, and every second counted. But for now, the streets were deceptively quiet, as if the city itself held its breath in anticipation of the storm that was coming. His mind raced with the knowledge he had gained. The alliance of Gotham's most dangerous rogues, the involvement of the League of Shadows, and the intricate layers of their plan all pointed to a single conclusion. Gotham was on the verge of collapse. The city's infrastructure, its people, its very spirit would soon be tested in ways they had never been before. Bane, with his brutal strength and unmatched strategic mind, was the linchpin in their operation, the architect of the chaos to come. But where was the trigger? What would set their plan into motion? The Crimson Knight knew he couldn't face this threat alone. Gotham's survival depended on swift action, on building a network of allies who could help him counter the villain's every move. The Knight's first priority was to secure his most trusted allies, starting with the one person who knew Gotham as well as he did, James Gordon. Commissioner Gordon had seen Gotham through its darkest days. He was a stalwart figure, unshakable in his commitment to the city, and despite everything he had witnessed, his belief in Gotham's potential for redemption remained strong. The Crimson Knight knew that if anyone could rally the city's resources, it was Gordon. Leaping from the gargoyle, the Crimson Knight descended rapidly, his cape catching the wind as he glided toward the Gotham City Police Department. The building was a symbol of law and order, a bastion in a city that seemed to constantly flirt with anarchy. As the Crimson Knight landed silently on the rooftop, he made his way to the commissioner's office, avoiding the few officers still lingering after the night shift. Inside, Gordon was at his desk, a cup of cold coffee beside him as he studied reports from the previous night's chaos. His face was etched with fatigue, lines deepened by years of stress. Despite the late hour, he hadn't left his post, knowing full well that Arkham's explosion was a harbinger of worse to come. Without a word, The Crimson Knight emerged from the shadows of the room. Gordon, unstartled by his presence, glanced up. "We're running out of time, Jim," the knight said, his voice a low growl. Gordon rubbed the bridge of his nose. "I figured as much. The streets are already buzzing with rumors. The city feels wrong. They're planning something big," the knight continued. "Bane, the League of Shadows, and every major villain we've ever faced together. Arkham was just a diversion." Gordon leaned back in his chair, the weight of the news settling heavily on him. "Any idea what they're after?" "Not yet, but whatever it is, it's already in motion." Gordon nodded grimly. "We'll get every officer on high alert. I'll pull in every favor we've got." As Gordon began to issue orders, the Crimson Knight's mind was already moving to the next step. The villains wouldn't strike in the open. They never did. They would use proxies, mercenaries, and criminal organizations to sow chaos before making their final move. And there was one person who had his fingers on the pulse of Gotham's underworld. Someone who could offer crucial intel: Selina Kyle, the notorious Catwoman. Despite her often conflicted loyalty, Selina had been a valuable ally in the past. She moved through the shadows of Gotham's criminal underworld like a ghost, always one step ahead of both the law and the villains she associated with. She had connections to every major player, and if anyone knew where the villains would strike next, it was her. Later that night, as Gotham's skyline darkened under the heavy clouds, the Crimson Knight made his way to one of Selina's known haunts, a high-end club on the east side. The club catered to Gotham's elite, a playground for those who thought they were untouchable. It was a world Selina fit into effortlessly, playing the role of the charming socialite while gathering information from the city's wealthiest criminals. From his perch on a nearby rooftop, the knight watched the entrance, his eyes scanning the faces of everyone who entered. After a few minutes, he spotted her. Selina Kyle, dressed in an elegant black gown, her figure graceful as she slipped past the bouncers and disappeared into the club. Moments later, the knight was inside, weaving through the crowd unseen. He knew better than to approach her in front of so many witnesses. Instead, he waited, keeping to the shadows until she made her way to a secluded balcony overlooking the city. There, in the dim glow of the city lights, the Crimson Knight approached her. "Still following me, I see," Selina purred without turning around, sensing his presence. "You know why I'm here," the knight said, his voice measured. Selina turned to face him, a playful smirk on her lips. "It's always business with you, isn't it? What happened to a simple hello?" The knight stepped closer, his expression unreadable beneath the mask. "Gotham is in danger, Selina. More than usual. I need information." Selina's smirk faded slightly, her eyes narrowing. "What kind of danger?" "Bane, the League, every major villain. They're planning something that could tear Gotham apart." She crossed her arms, leaning against the railing. "And you think I have the inside scoop? You're connected to everyone, Selina. You know the underworld better than anyone." There was a pause, the tension between them palpable. Selina weighed her options, torn between her complicated relationship with the knight and her instinct for self-preservation. She sighed, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "There's been talk," she admitted, her voice softening. "Whispers about something big. The Black Mask has been making moves, recruiting muscle. But that's not the worst of it." The knight's eyes sharpened. "Go on." "I've heard rumors about a shipment coming into Gotham tomorrow night," Selina continued. "Something valuable, something dangerous. The kind of thing that makes even the most hardened criminals nervous." "Where?" "The old docks, near Dixon Pier. But be careful, there are a lot of eyes on that shipment. If you're not careful, you'll tip off the wrong people." The knight nodded, his mind already racing with possibilities. The docks were the perfect place for the villains to smuggle in weapons or resources. It was isolated, with easy access to the river and plenty of places to hide. "Thanks, Selina," he said, his tone genuine. She smiled faintly, though her eyes held a mixture of concern and curiosity. "Just try not to get yourself killed, okay? Gotham wouldn't be the same without you." Without another word, the Crimson Knight disappeared into the night, leaving Selina alone on the balcony. She watched him go, her thoughts conflicted, but deep down she knew that whatever was coming, Gotham needed him more than ever. The Knight made his way back to the Batcave, the information from Selina weighing heavily on his mind. If the villains were bringing something dangerous into the city, it meant their plan was accelerating. There was no time to waste. He needed to be ready for whatever was coming. In the depths of the Batcave, surrounded by monitors displaying real-time data from across Gotham, the Crimson Knight began to prepare. He upgraded his suit, reinforced his weapons, and ran through simulations of potential scenarios. Every possible outcome played through his mind, every variable accounted for. But no matter how much he planned, he knew that the battle ahead would be unlike any he had ever faced. Tomorrow night, at the docks, the Crimson Knight would face the first real test of the villain's plan. And he would be ready. The night air was thick with anticipation as the Crimson Knight stood in the shadows overlooking Dixon Pier. The docks, typically deserted at this hour, now buzzed with covert activity. Large, unmarked shipping containers lined the waterfront, and the faint glow of lights flickered through the fog, revealing the silhouettes of armed guards patrolling the area. These weren't ordinary thugs. They moved with precision, their military training evident in their disciplined movements. Whoever orchestrated this operation had resources and connections far beyond Gotham's typical criminal underworld. The Knight's mind raced, piecing together the fragments of information. Bane's involvement, Selina's tip about the shipment, and the gathering of Gotham's most dangerous villains all pointed to something catastrophic. The cargo being smuggled in tonight was a key part of their plan, but what exactly it was remained a mystery. He had to stop it before it could be unleashed on the city. From his vantage point atop a nearby crane, the Crimson Knight activated his infrared lenses, scanning the area. The heat signatures of the guards popped into view, confirming their numbers, too many to take on in a direct assault. He would have to rely on stealth and precision, using the darkness to his advantage. As he prepared to move, his earpiece crackled to life, Alfred's voice cutting through the silence. "Sir, satellite feeds show an unusual amount of encrypted communication in the area. Whatever they're moving, they're coordinating it on a large scale. Be cautious." The Knight responded with a silent nod, his focus returning to the task at hand. Moving swiftly and silently, he descended from the crane, blending into the shadows as he navigated the perimeter of the pier. The guards, though well-trained, were no match for his stealth. He incapacitated the first two with swift, precise strikes, their bodies crumpling to the ground without a sound. He advanced deeper into the docks, his movements fluid and methodical. Each step brought him closer to the heart of the operation. As he neared the largest shipping container, he noticed something strange. A group of men huddled around a computer terminal, feverishly inputting data. The container's doors were ajar, and inside, glowing faintly in the dim light, were rows of large, reinforced canisters. The markings on them were familiar to the Knight: high-grade explosives, military surplus, enough to level several city blocks. But it wasn't just the explosives that caught his attention. Nestled between the canisters was something far more sinister. A sleek, black device pulsing with an eerie green light. The Knight's heart sank as he recognized it. A weapon of alien origin, likely obtained from one of Gotham's many black market dealers who had access to extraterrestrial technology. Whatever Bane and his allies were planning, They were using technology far beyond what the city had ever faced. The knight's mind raced. This wasn't just about destroying parts of Gotham. This was about unleashing chaos on a massive scale. The device could destabilize entire areas of the city, rendering traditional law enforcement useless. If it fell into the wrong hands, it could cripple Gotham's infrastructure and leave the city vulnerable to total anarchy. But before he could move in to disable the device, his instincts warned him of another presence. From the shadows emerged Bane, towering and imposing, his body wrapped in thick, armored plating. His eyes gleamed with cold intelligence as he stepped forward, flanked by several of his elite soldiers. The knight had expected a confrontation with Bane at some point, but not this soon. "Ah, the bat," Bane growled, his voice dripping with contempt. "I wondered when you would show yourself." The Crimson Knight stood his ground, his eyes narrowing as he analyzed the situation. Bane had the advantage. His men were armed and ready, and the explosives were rigged to detonate at the slightest misstep. But the knight wasn't about to back down. "This ends tonight, Bane," the knight said, his voice low and menacing. Bane chuckled, his massive frame shaking with dark amusement. "You still think you can stop me? You don't understand what's coming, do you? This is bigger than Gotham, bigger than you. The League of Shadows, the rogues you've faced. They're nothing compared to what we have planned." With a flick of his wrist, Bane signaled to his men, and they moved to encircle the knight. The tension in the air was palpable. Every muscle in the knight's body coiled in anticipation of the coming fight. In a blur of movement, the first soldier lunged at him, but the knight was faster. He dodged the attack with grace, delivering a brutal counterstrike that sent the man sprawling. Another attacker came from the left, and the knight used the momentum to flip him over, slamming him into the ground with a bone-crushing force. But Bane's soldiers were relentless, each one more skilled than the last, forcing the knight to fight with ruthless efficiency. As the battle raged on, Bane watched from a distance, his eyes cold and calculating. The knight was holding his own, but the odds were against him. Every second brought him closer to exhaustion, and Bane knew it. Finally, as the last of the soldiers fell, the knight turned to face Bane. His breath was ragged, his body bruised and battered, but his resolve remained unshaken. Bane stepped forward, his massive frame casting a shadow over the knight. "You're predictable, Bat. Always playing the hero, always trying to save a city that doesn't deserve it." Without warning, Bane lunged, his powerful fists crashing toward the knight with the force of a wrecking ball. The knight barely dodged in time, the impact sending shockwaves through the ground. Bane's strength was monstrous, his blows capable of shattering concrete, but the knight relied on his agility, using Bane's size against him. The fight between the two titans was brutal. Bane's relentless assaults were met with the knight's precise counters, but each strike from Bane took its toll. The knight could feel his ribs bruising under the force of the attacks, his muscles screaming in protest. But he couldn't afford to falter, not now. In the midst of the chaos, the knight spotted a weakness in Bane's armor. A small, exposed area near his neck, vulnerable if struck with enough force. But getting close enough to exploit it would be nearly impossible. He would need to create a distraction. With a quick flick of his wrist, the knight released a smoke pellet, filling the air with thick, choking fumes. Using the cover, he maneuvered around Bane, dodging his wild swings and positioning himself for the final strike. With all the strength he could muster, he delivered a precise blow to Bane's exposed neck, sending the giant stumbling backward. But Bane wasn't finished. Roaring with rage, he ripped off his mask, revealing the monstrous veins bulging beneath his skin. His body swelled with the surge of venom pumping through his system, making him even stronger, even more dangerous. "You can't win, Bat," Bane snarled, his voice distorted by the venom. "You never could." The knight knew he had only seconds before Bane's next attack would overwhelm him. His mind raced, searching for a way to disable the device and stop Bane from detonating the explosives. In the chaos, he noticed a small control panel on the side of the container, wired to the explosives. If he could disarm it, he could prevent the worst of the destruction. With Bane closing in, the knight made a split-second decision. He activated his grappling hook, launching himself toward the control panel just as Bane lunged for him. The knight's fingers flew over the controls, his mind working faster than ever. As Bane's massive fist came crashing down, the knight hit the final command, deactivating the explosives with seconds to spare. The explosion never came. Furious, Bane swung wildly at the knight, but the tide of the battle had shifted. With the threat of the explosives gone, the knight focused all his energy on taking Bane down. The fight was long and grueling, but in the end, it was the knight's resilience that triumphed. With one final, devastating blow, Bane fell to the ground, unconscious. The docks fell silent. Breathing heavily, the knight stood over Bane's fallen form. The threat had been neutralized, but he knew this was only the beginning. Bane had spoken of something larger, something that went beyond Gotham. The Crimson Knight would need to uncover the full extent of their plan before it was too late. As dawn broke over the city, the knight disappeared into the shadows, leaving the scene behind. Gotham had been saved, for now, but the true danger was still lurking, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. As Gotham awoke to a new day, the Crimson Knight returned to the Batcave, his mind burdened by the weight of the battle at Dixon Pier. Bane was down, the explosives disarmed, but the deeper conspiracy remained. His enemies weren't just acting alone. This was a coordinated effort involving Gotham's deadliest rogues, and their objective extended far beyond the city. There was something darker brewing in the shadows, something larger than even Bane's ambitions. The cave was silent except for the faint hum of machinery, the Batcomputer's glowing screens lighting the knight's path as he approached. Alfred, always attuned to the unspoken needs of his charge, had prepared a fresh set of armor and a hot cup of tea, though he knew the latter would likely go untouched. The knight had no time for rest. "Master Wayne," Alfred said in a low voice, his usual calmness barely masking the concern in his eyes. "I trust Bane is being properly accommodated?" "He's in the GCPD's highest security cell," the knight replied, not taking his eyes off the computer. "But this isn't over." Bane spoke of something much bigger, a plan involving Gotham's most dangerous villains. They're working together, and they've acquired off-world technology. Alfred raised an eyebrow. "Off-world, sir?" "Alien tech," the knight continued, typing furiously into the Batcomputer. "Something powerful enough to destabilize the city's entire infrastructure. Whatever it is, it was smuggled into the docks alongside those explosives. But Bane isn't smart enough to pull this off alone." The Batcomputer's screen lit up with a flurry of images, schematics of the alien device from the docks, profiles of known Gotham villains, and detailed maps of the city's underground networks. As the knight sifted through the data, he focused on one key element: the coordination between Gotham's rogues. None of them were known for working well together. They were too unpredictable, too self-serving. But now, under some unseen influence, they were collaborating. That meant someone or something was pulling the strings. Alfred's voice broke through the silence. "Sir, if they are truly united, this could only point to one individual. Someone with enough influence and power to control them." The knight's hands paused over the keyboard. He knew who Alfred was referring to. The Court of Owls. Gotham's secret rulers, the Court of Owls, had been a ghostly presence in the city for centuries. Their influence felt but never truly seen. They operated in the deepest shadows, manipulating events, people, and the city's very destiny. If they were behind this plot, then Gotham was in greater danger than ever before. But something still didn't sit right. The court operated through subtlety, using Gotham's elite and their assassin, the Talon, to achieve their ends. They didn't usually engage in direct conflict or work with criminals. So why now? The knight stood up, his cape swirling behind him. I need answers. I'm going to the Gotham Underground. Alfred's expression tightened, but he knew better than to argue. The knight had already made up his mind. The sewers beneath Gotham were a labyrinth of decaying tunnels, forgotten by time and ignored by the public. But the knight knew that within these dark recesses, hidden from the world above, lay the criminal underworld's true heart. The League of Shadows, the court, even the rogues had used these tunnels to hide their operations from prying eyes. Navigating through the tunnels, the knight moved with calculated precision, his every step silent. The stench of decay and stagnant water filled the air, but he paid no mind to the discomfort. His only concern was reaching his destination, an old, decrepit chamber deep within the sewers, known to house some of Gotham's most secret meetings. It was a place even the police dared not enter. As he neared the chamber, his senses heightened. He could hear faint voices echoing through the tunnels, the unmistakable sounds of conversation. His hand instinctively moved toward his belt, readying his gear. But he had to remain patient, had to wait for the right moment. Peering through a crack in the chamber's wall, the knight saw them. Several of Gotham's most notorious figures seated around a large, round table. At the head of the table, shrouded in darkness, sat the unmistakable silhouette of the Penguin. His sharp, beady eyes gleamed in the dim light, and his signature umbrella rested by his side. Seated alongside him were Gotham's deadliest villains. Two-Face, his disfigured face twisting in frustration as he argued with the Scarecrow, whose cold, calculating demeanor remained unshaken. To the left, Poison Ivy sat with a regal air, her presence dominating the chamber, vines creeping along the walls as though they obeyed her very will. Riddler, perched arrogantly in his chair, tapped his fingers impatiently on the table, his mind clearly racing with complex schemes. The Black Mask sat silently, his expression hidden behind the obsidian skull that had become his trademark, while Firefly adjusted his flamethrower, ready to unleash hell at the first sign of conflict. It was a gathering of Gotham's greatest villains, but something was off. They weren't arguing as they typically would, each trying to seize control of the conversation. No, there was an eerie calm about them, as if they were being guided by some unseen hand. As the knight listened, Penguin's gravelly voice echoed through the chamber. The Bat took down Bane at the docks, but that's only a minor setback. The device is still intact, and our benefactor has assured us that the next phase of the plan is already in motion. Benefactor, Two-Face snarled, his good side twitching in annoyance. Why should we trust some shadowy figure who won't even show their face? We're the ones risking our necks out there. Penguin smirked, tapping the handle of his umbrella against the floor. Because, Harvey, without our benefactor's resources, you'd be out there flipping your coin in the gutter. This is bigger than any of us. The Scarecrow, his voice cold and methodical, leaned forward. The fear we'll unleash upon Gotham will be unlike anything the city has ever seen. But the Bat will be a problem. He always is. At this, the Penguin chuckled darkly. Let the Bat come. He can't be everywhere at once. Our benefactor has plans for him, too. The knight's mind raced. They were planning something massive, but who was this mysterious benefactor? And what was their true objective? Couldn't just be about destroying Gotham. No, this was about control, power. The villains were merely pawns in a larger game. He needed more information, but time was running out. If he didn't act soon, whatever they were planning would be unleashed upon the city, and Gotham wouldn't survive it. As the villains continued their meeting, the knight silently retreated, disappearing back into the shadows. He had what he needed for now, but it wasn't enough. There was still too much he didn't know, and the Court of Owls loomed over everything like a dark cloud. He would have to confront them directly, and for that, he would need to dive deeper into Gotham's darkest secrets. But first, he had to prepare. The villains were gathering, and their benefactor, whoever they were, was pulling the strings from behind the curtain. The Crimson Knight had little time left to uncover the truth. The Batcave hummed with activity as the Crimson Knight returned from the underground, the heavy weight of what he had discovered settling in the pit of his stomach. He felt the walls closing in, the realization of the stakes looming larger than ever. The villains of Gotham were not just acting on their own. They were part of a larger scheme orchestrated by an unseen hand. The Knight paced the cave, deep in thought, as Alfred observed quietly from a distance. "Master Wayne," Alfred interjected, breaking the silence that had settled. "Have you uncovered the identity of this benefactor?" The Knight paused, considering. "No, but I suspect it's someone with deep resources and knowledge of Gotham. Whoever they are, they've managed to unite our most dangerous foes under a single cause. I need to confront the Court of Owls and see what they know about this benefactor and their plans." Alfred nodded, his concern evident. "A wise decision, but the court is elusive. They operate in secrecy, and you'll be stepping into their territory." "I know," the Knight replied, determination hardening his resolve. "But I can't wait for them to strike first." He donned his armor, the familiar weight of the cowl settling on his head like a second skin. The Batmobile's engine roared to life as he sped through the night, the dark streets of Gotham flashing by in a blur. He was headed for the one place that had been marked in the shadows for centuries, a place where the court had conducted their secret dealings. The old Gotham City Hall, long abandoned but still echoing with whispers of the past. As he approached the building, the Knight's instincts heightened. The moonlight glinted off the rain-soaked pavement, casting long shadows that danced as the wind picked up. Parking the Batmobile discreetly, he activated the cloaking device, rendering it nearly invisible. Stepping into the damp air, he felt the presence of the city around him. Gotham, a living entity, breathing with secrets and danger. Navigating through the darkened hallways of the City Hall, he was on high alert. The echoes of his footsteps were the only sound, a rhythmic reminder of his solitude in this ancient structure. He reached the central chamber, where the court had been known to gather. The vastness of the room loomed around him, adorned with faded murals of Gotham's founding families and long-dead politicians. Dust motes floated in the moonlight streaming through broken windows, creating an ethereal atmosphere that belied the danger lurking within. As he took a moment to survey the room, the Knight felt a chill race down his spine. He was not alone. From the shadows emerged figures clad in dark robes, their faces obscured by masks that bore the emblem of an owl. The air crackled with tension as the members of the court revealed themselves, each step they took resonating with authority and malice. "You've come seeking answers, Crimson Knight," one of the figures spoke, their voice echoing through the chamber. But the truth is not easily uncovered. The Knight remained poised, his eyes scanning the figures for any sign of weakness. "I want to know who is behind the recent attacks in Gotham. Your influence runs deep. You must know who is orchestrating this chaos." The leader of the court stepped forward, the mask gleaming in the dim light. "You are brave to confront us, but foolish to think you can extract information without consequence. The benefactor has plans that extend far beyond your comprehension." "Then enlighten me," the Knight demanded, his voice steady. "I know you've been involved in this. The villains are united under a single cause. What do they plan to do?" A collective murmur rippled through the ranks of the court, their eyes glinting with intrigue. The leader raised a hand, silencing the crowd. "The court operates in the shadows, manipulating the strings of Gotham. We do not reveal our secrets lightly. The benefactor is a force beyond your reach. They possess technology that can reshape the very fabric of this city. The knight's heart raced. What technology? Technology from beyond the stars. The leader continued, their voice low and menacing. A weapon that can dismantle the barriers between worlds, unleashing chaos and power upon Gotham. With it, we can rise and claim what is rightfully ours. Fury surged through the night as he realized the magnitude of the threat. You think you can control that power? You'll destroy everything this city stands for. The leader stepped closer, their gaze unyielding. Gotham has long been a city of decay, a festering wound. Only through rebirth can it thrive. You, the Bat, represent the old ways, but those days are numbered. The knight's anger boiled over. He lunged forward, grappling with the leader, his fists colliding with the masked figure. But as they struggled, the court's members stepped in, surrounding him. The knight fought fiercely, delivering powerful blows, but they were overwhelming in number. Shadows moved around him, and soon he was outnumbered, grappling against the tide of cloaked figures. In the midst of the chaos, the knight caught sight of a flicker of movement in the corner of his eye. A figure emerged from the shadows, clad in a dark suit, a familiar silhouette, the Talon, the court's deadly assassin. The Talon lunged at him with blinding speed, wielding twin blades that gleamed with a menacing hunger for blood. The knight narrowly dodged the attack, rolling to the side and regaining his footing. He knew the Talon was a lethal adversary, trained to eliminate anyone who posed a threat to the court. As they exchanged blows, the knight felt the weight of the room closing in around him, every move calculated and deadly. Your resistance is futile, Bat, the Talon taunted, his voice cold as ice. You cannot fight the inevitable, but the knight was relentless. With a swift maneuver, he disarmed the Talon, sending one blade skidding across the floor. He countered with a powerful strike, knocking the assassin to the ground, but the Talon was quick to recover, using the momentum to launch himself back into the fray. As they clashed, the knight's mind raced. He needed to turn the tide. With a calculated move, he activated a smoke bomb, filling the chamber with thick clouds of darkness. He could hear the frantic movements of the court and the Talon trying to locate him, but he was one step ahead. Using the smoke to his advantage, the knight disappeared into the shadows, moving stealthily around the chamber. He could sense the confusion and panic as the court struggled to regain control. This was his chance to find out more about the benefactor and their plans. In the chaos, the knight overheard snippets of conversation. The court members were arguing amongst themselves, their confidence shaken by his sudden disappearance. We must regroup. The Bat cannot be allowed to disrupt our plans, one voice exclaimed. He edged closer, listening intently. The benefactor's arrival is imminent. We cannot fail them, another warned, their tone laced with desperation. The knight's heart raced at the mention of the benefactor. Whoever they were approaching, and it was clear that time was running out. He had to escape and gather more information about their identity. As the smoke began to dissipate, the knight maneuvered his way toward a side exit, ready to slip away unnoticed. But the Talon was not far behind. Emerging from the haze, the assassin lunged at him once more, determination etched into his features. You cannot escape the court, the Talon hissed, his voice echoing in the empty chamber. You will fall like all those who oppose us. With a final surge of strength, the knight countered the attack, grappling with the Talon in a fierce struggle. Their bodies collided against the ancient stone walls, each combatant refusing to yield. But the knight knew he had to retreat. The court was regrouping, and he was vastly outnumbered. With a calculated feint, He managed to break free from the Talon's grasp, darting toward the exit. He could hear the shouts of the court members echoing behind him, their fury palpable as he escaped into the night. The heavy door of the chamber creaked shut behind him, sealing off the chaos within. Outside, the city was alive with the sounds of sirens and the distant glow of neon lights. The knight paused, catching his breath. He had evaded the court, but the danger was far from over. The mention of the benefactor weighed heavily on his mind. Whoever this entity was, they were about to unleash something terrible upon Gotham. Climbing into the Batmobile, the knight punched in the coordinates for the Gotham docks. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, but he needed more information. The dockyard was where the alien technology had first appeared, and he was determined to trace its origin back to whoever was responsible. As the Batmobile roared to life, the knight's resolve hardened. He would uncover the truth about the benefactor and their plans. Gotham depended on him, and he would stop at nothing to protect his city from the darkness that threatened to consume it. The war was only beginning, and he would be ready to face whatever horrors awaited him.